The scream hit the empty school corridor like glass, sharp and shivering, and Ava froze mid-step. She tasted metal in her mouth, and heard lockers vibrate in the hush that followed. The night custodian's radio crackled and then died, as if the building swallowed its own breath. Ava said, "Hello, who's there?" and her voice came out thin and brave. A red exit sign pulsed over pooled rainwater, casting veins of light across the tiles. She saw her office door, ajar, and a folder on the floor, like a fallen bird. Ava said, "This isn't funny," while her heart tapped a drumline in her ribs. A storm dragged its nails along the roof, and the fluorescents flickered in sync. She knelt, fingertips brushing a photo of a man whose face she knew too well. Ava whispered, "Dad," and the word felt like a key grinding in a rusted lock. Somewhere deep in the building a door slammed, and the scream echoed again. The second scream was smaller, as if swallowed mid-flight, and Ava stepped into her office with the calm she saves for frightened children. She set the folder on the desk and let the photo stare back. A wind gust rattled the blinds, and the tape recorder clacked as if nudged. Ava said, "Who is in here?" and her voice firmed into command. The desk lamp haloed dust like snow around a battlefield of notes and red string. She saw her handwriting circling a name that only lived in family silence. Ava said, "I am not afraid of ghosts," and she almost believed it. The phone buzzed again, this time a text blinking like a pulse. The message read, "You were never meant to see that." Ava whispered, "Then why leave it where I'd look?" And the building answered with a groan. She closed the door, turned the lock, and faced the truth she had chased for years. The custodian's key scraped the lock outside, and Ava held her breath while the world shrank to hinges. "Mr. Perez," said Miss Khan, "everything okay?" And his worry bled through the door. Ava said, "Stay in the hall, please," and she heard her own certainty surprise him. The lamp hummed like an insect caught in glass. She flipped the folder and found a clipped article about a scandal she pretends not to know. The headline carried her father's surname like a bruise. Ava said, "If this is a game, I am done playing," and the storm hammered approval. A shadow crossed the frosted glass and paused at her nameplate. Mr. Perez said, "I will call it in," and his footsteps withdrew into the echoing dark. The phone lit with a contact she had not seen in months, and Ava stared at Lena in white letters. She answered on speaker, because her hands had started to shake. Lena said, "You need to leave now," and the urgency peeled paint from the inside of Ava's ribs. Ava said, "Someone left me proof," and she heard the old friendship strain like wet rope. A storm siren moaned in the city distance. Lena said, "Then listen carefully, and put nothing in writing," and the desk lamp buzzed in protest. Ava said, "How long have you known?" and silence filled faster than rain fills a bucket. The recorder clicked, and Ava pressed stop, as if that could halt the years. Lightning tore the sky open, and in the flash Ava saw the name pinned under red string like a specimen. It matched the surname in the article, and the whisper that chased her childhood. "Ava," said Rafiq Malik, and the room seemed to tilt toward the desk. The scream had dragged her here, but the name would not let her leave. Lena said, "Do not say that on the phone," and the call hissed with frightened breath. Ava said, "He ruined my mother," and each word landed like a gavel. The building settled, and the door hinges clicked as if nodding. Somewhere below, a stairwell echoed with measured steps. Ava steadied her hands and reached for the folder again, ready to pull the first thread. Dawn rinsed the city clean, but Ava's bones still held storm noise. She folded lesson plans like small shields, and warmed her hands on a cracked mug. Ava said, "We start gentle today," and the steam fogged the window with a ghostly script. A photo of her mother watched from the shelf, soft-eyed and stubborn-jawed. Ava said, "I will not drop this thread," and the room answered with quiet. Her phone showed unread messages, and she swiped past them like thorns. Rent notices curled on the counter, and she pressed them flat with a book. Ava said, "The kids come first," and her shoulders settled into purpose. The city buses sighed outside, and the day opened slowly. She lifted her bag and felt the folder's weight like a stone she chose to carry. The community center smelled of pencils and floor wax, and laughter stitched the halls. Noor hunched over a workbook, her braid neat and her eyes lit like flint. Ava said, "Show me how you saw it," and slid a pencil across the table. Noor said, "It is patterns, not numbers," and her hand danced across graph paper. Sunlight pooled on their elbows and made the dust look like small planets. Ava said, "You are allowed to be brilliant," and Noor's smile flickered like a shy lamp. A clock ticked loudly, measuring courage in seconds. Ava drew a triangle and waited for Noor to correct it. Noor said, "This angle is lying," and erased with surgical care. The room exhaled as if learning a new shape for hope. The staff meeting stacked chairs and doubts in equal piles. An administrator clicked slides about cuts while faces crumpled around the table. Ava said, "We need a math lab for after school," and the room blinked. The administrator said, "There is no funding," and the projector hummed like a closed door. Ava said, "There is Noor and 10 more like her," and her voice carried steady heat. A colleague shifted and studied his hands. The clock's second hand bit through hope with tiny teeth. The administrator said, "We must prioritize optics," and the word felt like dust. Ava said, "I will find a way," and wrote her number on the whiteboard. The marker squeaked like a promise held by friction alone. The bus window carried her reflection beside a moving city she barely touched. Ava traced an old scar on the folder's edge like a coastline she knew by memory. Ava said, "You taught me to keep receipts, Mama," and the word softened her jaw. A child laughed 3 seats back, bright as a bell. Ava said, "I will not be small for their comfort," and the engine answered with a low vow. She pictured a kitchen where secrets crowded the stove. "Meh," her mother said, "Trust what you count twice," and the memory warmed like bread. The skyline leaned, and the sun carved shapes out of the river. Ava pressed the folder to her ribs, feeling the steady drum that never lied. The stop cord clicked, and she stood into the weight of what waited. Evening found her outside Noor's building, where mailboxes sagged like tired mouths. Ava slid worksheets into an envelope with a granola bar tucked like a secret. A neighbor said, "She is shy but fierce," and the stairwell swallowed the words. Ava said, "I see that fire," and taped the envelope with patient care. A cat threaded around her ankles and claimed her shoes with rain smell. The sky bruised purple, while the streetlights rehearsed their cues. Ava said, "You are allowed a future," and the sentence steadied her spine. A door opened above and shut gently, like a promise held. She wrote her number bold on the flap and underlined it twice. Then she stepped back and let hope sit on the mat like a lantern. The municipal archive smelled like dust and photocopier heat, and Ava claimed a terminal. A clerk said, "Sealed adoptions require a court order," and slid a form like a wall. Ava said, "I am searching campaign filings," and kept her eyes calm. The microfilm reader whirred and coughed up dates that bruised her memory. She found a committee ledger with a P.O. box that matched an old bill at home. Ava said, "Rafiq Malik bought silence with scholarships," and the word snagged. The clerk said, "Names do not belong to rumors," and watched her too closely. A printout stuttered into her hand like a nervous bird. The margin note read, "Educational Trust Disbursement, Con.I." Ava said, "My mother counted twice," and she circled the line in red. Outside, noon light felt colder than night, and the city kept its secrets moving. The diner's neon made a small sunrise in chrome, and the ex-reporter stirred coffee. Malik said, "I chased that story until editors clipped my wings," and slid a folder across. Ava said, "Tell me what got buried," and did not touch the cup. He said, "A charity that paid out favors, and one woman who would not sign." The page showed a grainy photo of her mother standing in a doorway. Ava said, "She taught me to keep receipts," and her hand steadied on the vinyl. Malik said, There were threats and a break-in that never made the blotter. A thumb drive clicked on the table like a dare. Ava said, "I can carry this risk," and meant every syllable. Outside, a siren smeared the window red, and the neon hummed like a warning. Back at the community center, the hallway felt too quiet, and a note waited on her door. Ava read, "Stop digging," cut from headlines and glued like a child's craft. "Noor," said Miss Khan, "can I show you a trick?" and held up a maze like a smile. Ava said, "2 minutes, champ," and slid the note into her sleeve with a smooth breath. The office smelled wrong, like drawers opened by someone impatient. A stapler lay on the floor like a stubbed toe, and the board strings sagged. Ava said, "They only know I am close," and set the map straight again. Noor said, "The answer is here, not there," and traced a loop that cut the maze clean. Ava said, "You are right," and felt the words align like gears. In her pocket, the paper throbbed like a small mean heart. The sidewalk flowed like a river, and Ava let it carry her while she watched shadows. A gray sedan idled half a block back like a patient cough. Her phone lit unknown, and then died as she refused it. Ava said, "Not tonight," and cut through a market where voices braided. A vendor said, "Try the tea," and pressed steam into her hands like a shield. She saw a man with a party pin, shaped like a leaf and a crown. Ava said, "You blinked," and turned into a shop mirrored in 100 angles. Lena texted, "Come to me now," and the letters bit her palm. She slipped out the back with the tea blazing a path. In the alley, she exhaled the fear and kept the proof near her ribs. Night pressed close in her apartment, and Ava pulled a shoebox from the back of a closet. The label read, "Taxes 2007, in her mother's tidy hand. Inside, a cassette lay wrapped in a grocery receipt like a seed. Ava said, "Please be more than ghosts," and fed tape to the old recorder. A man said, "We will ensure the scholarship, Ms. Khan, and no one needs trouble." Her mother said, "Then put it in writing," and the tape clicked with soft iron. Ava said, "He bought time, not silence," and a breath she owned returned. A letter fragment named the Educational Trust, and a date that matched the ledger. She folded the proof, and felt its heat like fresh bread. Then she grabbed her keys and went to find Lena, because the circle had to close. Lena's door opened on the chain, and the hallway smelled like rain and fried onions. Lena said, "Show me what you brought," and her eyes kept counting exits. Ava slid the cassette, and the ledger copy across her palm like hot stones. Ava said, "You told me to come, so start talking," and stepped inside when the chain dropped. The apartment was neat, in the way fear is neat. A kettle hissed like a secret trying to get out. Lena said, "I tried to keep you clear," and she set 2 cups down without sitting. Ava said, "Clear of what, exactly?" and her jaw felt locked in place. The city throbbed through the windows, as if listening for names. Lena said, "Of him, and of the people who feed on him," and she touched the cassette like it might bite. Ava said, "His name is on my wall," and the room leaned toward the truth that would not move back. Lena took a breath like a diver, and opened a drawer lined with old badges. Lena said, "I was an aide on his campaign, and a laminate with Malik blazed in the lamp." Ava said, "You looked me in the eye for years," and the words scraped her throat. Lena said, "I was 19 and smart, and so sure I mattered," and her mouth went thin. The badge clinked against a key shaped like a leaf and a crown. Ava said, "The same pin I saw in the market," and the memory snapped into place. Lena said, "They used me to find your mother when the story shook loose." Silence filled the room like water finding every crack. Ava said, "You knew before I did," and it landed like a verdict. Lena said, "I knew, and I kept you breathing," and the kettle finally clicked off. Lena slid a thin envelope across the table, and the paper rasped like a match. Lena said, "Your mother made me swear I would hold this until you were ready," and her hands trembled. Ava said, "Ready is a word people use to mean never," and she broke the seal. Inside, a letter carried a date that matched the trust ledger. Her mother wrote, "He is your father, and I will not give him your name." Ava said, Say it out loud, and the room tightened. Lena said, Rafiq, Malik is your father, and the house seemed to shift on its studs. Ava said, you let me chase smoke when you held the fire, and heat rose behind her eyes. Lena said, I kept you out of their filings and off their lists, and the lamp hummed hard. The letter lay between them like a blade and a bridge. The argument came in waves, and both women stood to survive the tide. Ava said, you stole years. I could have asked her the right questions, and her voice shook but did not break. Lena said, I took the knives so you could grow, and she swallowed the edge. Ava said, you also took my choice, and the word choice rang like metal. Sirens smeared blue across the blinds, as if underlining every line. Lena said, the night your window broke, I was the one who paid them to stop, and shame burned her face. Ava said, you kept me safe and small. And the balance hurt. A neighbor thumped a wall, impatient with other people's lives. Lena said, hate me if you must, but do not walk alone into them, and she pushed a list of names. Ava looked at the list and saw a path she could map. The tide ebbed, and what remained was work. Ava said, we go to Malik the reporter and we do it clean, and her breath steadied. Lena said, he will run if he hears your name too soon, and she circled 2 numbers. Ava said, then we draw him into daylight with his own filings, and the plan took shape. Lena pulled a small safe from the closet like a stubborn memory. Inside were copies of checks that matched the trust, and 3 burner phones. Ava said, you were never just an aide, and respect complicated the anger. Lena said, I was a witness who chose badly, and then chose better, and she met Ava's eyes. The city's pulse softened, and the kettle steamed again. Ava said, no more maps that keep me out, and she took the list. Together, they packed proof that could survive the morning. The hotel hummed with donor chatter, and Ava studied the schedule like a battlefield map. Lena said, we seed the queue, and pull him to the side room, and tapped 2 names. Malik said, my camera is live the second you nod, and slid her an earpiece. Ava said, if he folds, we go quiet, and felt the lie taste bitter. Lena said, if he buys us, we are sold forever, and zipped her coat. Ava pictured Noor's bright hands, mapping a maze to daylight. Malik said, he trusts rooms he thinks he owns, and pointed at a service hall. Ava said, then I will ask my father a public question, and the word father did not flinch. The chandelier rang like ice when servers passed with trays. Ava pressed the cassette into her pocket and walked toward the light. The fundraiser theme promised renewal, and a leaf crown logo bloomed on every screen. Rafiq Malik shook hands with a smile, trained to land like favor. Ava said, one question for the education plank, and a volunteer waved her forward. Lena drifted to the side door, counting guards and exits. Malik said, audio is clean, and his voice tucked into her ear like steel. Rafiq Malik said, we value teachers, and the crowd applauded on cue. Ava said, how does the Educational Trust choose its recipients? And silence sharpened. His eyes flicked to a man with an earpiece and back. The volunteer said, we will take questions later, and tried to move her along. Ava said, I have documentation, and the room's temperature changed. A handler ushered Ava to a side salon dressed in calm art and thicker carpet. Rafiq Malik said, let us be constructive, and closed the door with a soft click. Ava said, you are my father, and the word did not shake. He said, people say cruel things to wound careers, and poured water he would not drink. Ava set the ledger copy down, and the cassette beside it like matched teeth. Rafiq Malik said, that tape is inadmissible in the court of power, and smiled thin. Ava said, it is admissible in the court of Noor, and her spine settled. He said, I can end your center or end your doubts, and leaned in with velvet threat. Ava said, you bought time, not love, and the account is due, and did not look away. He opened a leather folder and fanned documents like quiet knives. Rafiq Malik said, non-profits fail every day when donors forget them, and tapped a check template. Ava saw Noor's math lab as if it already existed, and then as rubble. He said, "Or you can be my daughter and build twice as much," and the word daughter bent the air. Ava said, "You mean be your silence," and the floor leveled under her feet. Her phone buzzed with Lena's text, "The tail is moving." Malik said, "We are ready when you are," and the earpiece steadied her. Rafiq Malik said, "Choose," and folded his hands like a benediction. Ava breathed once for her mother, and once for the girl with the maze. Then she reached for the cassette and chose Daylight. The doors swung, and Ava walked back into the ballroom with the cassette like a fuse. Lena said, "Mic 1 will take an aux feed," and slid a small cable into her palm. Malik said, "Confirm, go," and the camera's tally light winked red. Ava said, "I have a statement and a recording," and her voice carried clean. Rafiq Malik said, "We do not dignify theatrics," and motioned to security. Ava said, "This is not theater," and pressed play, letting her mother's voice fill the room. The tape said, "Then put it in writing," and chairs scraped as donors turned. Lena said, "Hold the frame," and Malik kept the shot steady as a verdict. Ava faced the stage, and did not blink as the first murmurs rose like weather. The room broke into pockets of noise, and then the noise turned into exits. A donor said, "Turn that off," and no one obeyed him. Rafiq Malik said, "Fabrications," but the tape kept its calm. Malik said, "We are live," and the red light held steady. Lena said, "Copy secured," and slipped a drive into her boot. Ava said, "This is my mother's voice," and the crowd felt the words land. Security drifted closer, and then stalled at the cameras. A reporter said, "Will you submit this to ethics?" and pens lifted like spears. Ava said, "Tonight," and her spine did not tremble. Rafiq Malik said, "You will regret this," and the chandelier chimed like glass teeth. Malik said, "Statement posted," and phones lit the aisles. Ava said, "Name the harm, and pay it back," and the night finally took a breath. Dawn carried sirens that were not for her, and the courthouse steps filled with mics. Malik said, "Keep answers short and check the time again." Lena said, "We filed chain of custody," and passed a stamped receipt. Ava said, "The trust laundered favors as scholarships," and the wind lifted paper. A state council said, "An inquiry is open," and reporters sharpened. Ava said, "My mother asked for paper, and the paper now speaks," and held the ledger. Malik said, "We will publish every document," and held the camera steady. Lena said, "Witness list delivered," and did not blink. A supporter said, "Teachers stand with you," and a small cheer warmed the stone. Ava said, "We are here for the kids you used," and the sentence felt clean. Somewhere a car horn scolded the morning, and the city woke to work. By afternoon the center buzzed like a hive that found its queen. A volunteer said, "The grant called back," and waved a letter with a seal. Malik said, "Anonymous donors matched the lab goal," and grinned like a tired son. Ava said, "We build this right," and rolled butcher paper across tables. Noor said, "Give me the whiteboard," and drew a lattice that sang. Ava said, "Name your theorem," and watched confidence arrive. Noor said, "It is symmetry hiding in plain sight," and the room leaned closer. A parent said, "She never stops thinking," and pride softened the edges. Lena said, "Electrician at 3, locks at 5, and checked her list twice. Ava said, "Welcome to the math lab," and the words fit like a new key. Outside, buses sighed, and the world felt possible again. Evenings settled like a hand that meant comfort, not control. Ava spread the letter on her kitchen table and let silence earn its space. Ava said, "Mama, I named him in a room he built," and the kettle whispered. Lena said, "I will answer questions under oath," and sat opposite without armor. Ava said, "I do not forgive the hiding," and kept her palm on the paper. Lena said, "I will carry that," and did not try to move it. Ava said, "But I see the care behind the harm," and the air eased. Malik texted, "Story up," and the link glowed like a small fire. Ava said, "We are not done," and drew boxes for tomorrow's tasks. Lena said, "Good," and the word rang true. Outside, the streetlights learned a softer color, and the night stayed. The next morning smelled like new paint and sharpened pencils. Ava said, "Open," and the math lab breathed for the first time. Noor said, "Can we try the hard one?" and pointed at a problem like a mountain. Ava said, "Together," and chalk met board with a sure scratch. A student said, "I never liked numbers," and then smiled when the pattern clicked. Malik said, "The phones will keep ringing," and set a tripod in the corner. Lena said, "Locks changed, cameras on, files backed, and checked the door." Ava said, "We are safe enough to grow," and the room agreed. Noor said, "It is not a maze if you see the map," and laughter loosened the walls. Ava said, "Class, meet the future," and meant Noor and all of them. Sunlight held steady, and nothing important flickered. Morning opened without sirens, and Ava let the quiet test her. Headlines ticked across her phone like migrating birds, and none carried her name. Ava said, "Good," and set the screen face down. The cassette sat on the table like a spent match. Lena said, "Council scheduled us for Thursday," and the word sounded ordinary at last. Ava said, "We will bring copies and calm," and poured tea for two. Malik texted, "Streams past 1 million," and she felt only focus. Ava said, "The story is not the point," and looked at the lesson plan. Outside, buses sighed their old music. Ava said, "Today we measure what grows when fear leaves," and the room brightened. She folded the letter back into its envelope, as if tucking in a child. The day asked nothing more than steady work, and that felt like mercy. The math lab hummed like a low choir, and Noor faced a whiteboard tall as a door. Noor said, "I can invert it without division," and raised her chin. Ava said, "Show the spine of your idea," and the room leaned in. Chalk whispered across the board like rain finding a roofline. A student said, "Slow down," and Noor smiled and slowed. Ava said, "Name what you just invented," and pride warmed the air. Noor said, "A symmetry trick that turns the maze sideways," and laughter shook loose. A parent filmed with tears refusing to fall. Ava said, "Genius is a habit, not a flash," and every pencil moved. The bell rang and felt like applause. Noor said, "Can I teach this tomorrow?" and Ava nodded like a sunrise. The district office smelled like paper and patience, and the clerk stamped forms with gentle thunder. Lena said, "Originals logged and sealed," and slid the receipt across. Ava said, "No more secrets in drawers," and her shoulders dropped. The council said, "You may be contacted," and made it sound like weather. Ava said, "We will answer with documents," and kept her tone even. In the hallway, Malik said he hired new counsel and did not lace it with drama. Ava said, "Let him," and the word landed without heat. The elevator sighed them down toward ordinary streets. Lena said, "You were steady when it shook," and pride softened her voice. Ava said, "You were honest when it counted," and the sentence closed a door that needed closing. Outside, light pooled on wet stone and looked like permission. The river held the city like a long breath, and Ava chose a quiet bench. She unfolded her mother's letter and let the wind read a corner. Ava said, "I named him, and I did not become him," and her voice stayed soft. A rower stitched the water into neat lines. Ava said, "I kept the part of us that counts," and smiled without breaking. She placed a copy of the letter in a sealed pouch and watched it sink under a flat stone by the roots. Ava said, "You taught me to count twice," and the phrase finally meant peace. A gull scolded the sky for drama it did not need. She closed her eyes and measured 10 breaths like steady sums. Then she stood and left the view better than she found it. Evening gathered without threat, and the city's lights felt like neighbors. The center's door clicked behind her, and the street smelled of bread and rain. Noor said, "I posted the solution," and waved from the window with both hands. Ava said, "Teach it twice, own it forever," and the words tasted right. Lena said, I will lock up, and her voice held ease, not apology. Malik said tomorrow we cover scholarships done right, and lifted his camera like a promise. Ava said, make it boring in the best way, and laughed at last. Traffic moved like a patient river, and nothing chased her. She walked toward a future that did not need permission slips. Ava said, we keep building, and the night agreed by staying simple. She did not look back, because everything she needed was forward.